also see us there. It's going to be on my channel in about 10 seconds, and then we'll get started. Also see us there. It's going to be on my channel in about 10 seconds. Oh, that's it. Okay, and let's get started because we like to start on time. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. We have a great new name. It took us about 7 months to come up with the name, but don't judge us. It's a really good name. We're now called From the Ground Up. And as I said, Happy New Year. And thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very, very special guest, as you all know. Lirat and I started From the Ground Up to have a chance, an opportunity to talk to the leaders of the real estate industry and ask them the questions that we usually don't get a chance to ask. And we figured that if we find it interesting, probably others would do too. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not yet connected. And my co-host and dear friend is Lirat Kligman, the co-founder of the Yorkville team, commercial and residential sales team in Toronto. Lirat, please, I know it's not necessarily, but please do introduce our guest today.
Yes, with pleasure. So, Jennifer Keesmaat's with us today from Markee Developments. Jennifer is the former chief planner for the city of Toronto, where she led a team of planners overseeing unprecedented growth and urban development. As a founding partner of Dialogue and the Office for Urbanism, Jennifer has worked in municipalities across Canada and around the world on urban design guidelines, official plan reviews, and strategies for creating resilient 21st century cities. She's a recognized expert in transit planning, heritage preservation, strategy development, sustainable economic development, and the creation of walkable, complete communities. As a registered professional planner, Jennifer's work has been repeatedly recognized by professional associations, including as the recipient of the 2016 President's Award of Excellence from the Canadian Institute of Planners. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really happy to have you kick off our season for 2021. So why don't we just start by talking about your background and career path. You know, most career paths are not straight. They tend to evolve and it's important to be agile and responsive. So give us a background on where you came from.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of your conversation. I like your new name. It's a great name. So, you know, sometimes it's worth waiting for to get to the right name. So, you know, my background is really unconventional in that I did my undergraduate degree in liberal arts in philosophy and English. I did a combined honors degree from Western. And when I finished that degree, I realized that I wanted to do something professionally that meant I wasn't in my head. Because doing philosophy and English, like you're up here, you're in your head all day long. And I wanted to do something that I could touch and see and feel. And inevitably that led me to getting engaged in community work and community activism. And in particular, in Vancouver, where I was living after I graduated, I became very involved in issues around gentrification and housing and how you build community and what communities look like. And that led me to pursue a planning degree. And following pursuing my planning degree, I worked very, very briefly. I was engaged by the city of Toronto and then decided I wanted to go into the private sector, where I worked for Urban Strategies and then a firm called Brooke McElroy, and subsequently decided to create my own company with two partners called Office for Urbanism. And when we started Office for Urbanism, we sort of thought, well, you know, we're going to spend the first 5 years tilling the soil, you know, trying to build a name for ourselves. But all three of us have been in the industry already. My partners were Harold Maddie and Antonio Gomez Palacio. And instead what happened was, you know, we like to reach for the stars. So we bid on one of the most significant RFPs that year was the Union Station Master Plan RFP. And we bid on it and we won it. So we were in that crazy situation that happens sometimes on the consulting side, where you work really hard to win a project, you win it, and when you win it, you go, oh shit, how are we going to do this? Like, we need more people, we need more resources. How are we going to manage the workload? So we staffed up, and that was really the beginning of Office for Urbanism. And we're very proud of that master plan. And I'm actually I like to tell people we didn't name it Jurassic Park, but we did all the work to create Jurassic Park, including the placement of the buildings and the urban design, and subsequently became, one of the most famous plazas in Canada, obviously. But also the work on Front Street was all the work that was in our master plan, and we're very proud of that as well. Subsequently, I created a company called Dialogue, merging Office for Urbanism with some national companies and with some additional disciplines. So Office for Urbanism was planning, but then we merged with engineering, interior design, and architecture. And that just really broadened the scope of what we were working on. And we were working on projects across the country. And while I was there, happily, merrily going along my way, building this company with my partners and colleagues, I was called by a search firm at the City of Toronto. And they called me and I went, ha, 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 who would want that crazy job of being the chief planner in Toronto? Well, as they say, the rest is history. But I ended up taking that role at the City of Toronto for a variety of reasons. And I'll just go back and say something that I didn't say at the beginning, which is people often say, do what you love, like do what you love and the money will follow. Like do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I'm sure you've heard that expression. I probably even have said it to my kids. But I have a bit of a twist on it, which I think in the 2021 matters more than ever, which is do what you believe in. You might not even totally love it, but it's what you believe in, where you believe every day your work matters and every day there's purpose to the work that you do. And that has actually been my guiding principle. Every time I've made any kind of career choice, my guiding principle has been doing something that I actually believes matters. And in some ways, that's sort of a mental health strategy. I like working hard. I want my time to matter. I don't want to do things that I think are futile. And so at that moment in time, Rob Ford was mayor. It was very clear that our city could go in two different directions. And I wanted to be a part of shaping the direction and the future of the city that I love in. I've been working on cities all over the world. I committed to doing a 5-year term. I did my 5-year term. I'm very proud of the work that I did there, including kind of revamping the development approvals process. And by my 3rd year, we were approving 20% more development on an annual basis, and I would argue better development than when I had arrived. And we continued to increase that number by 20% each subsequent year, which was a really critical part of what you see happening in the landscape of the city today, but also the great inroads that I made in building a team that focused on really city building as opposed to regulation, and thinking about a big vision and a big dream for the city. Things like the King Street pilot came out of, can we dream of the city functioning in a different way? Rail Deck Park, can we dream of the city in a different way? Once I was done my term there, I left. I did a few different things, some of which including running for mayor. And now a big part of what I'm doing, in addition to continuing to work in cities around the world, is again, going back to that question of purpose. I've created a development company called Markee Developments, where we're taking the best of private sector expertise, and my partner's been in the private sector his whole career, and figuring out how we can deliver on a public good. And that public good is ensuring that everyone, in particular middle income earners who are the lifeblood of our cities, can live in high quality, beautiful housing that is sustainable and that really delivers on creating a high quality of life.
That's an amazing story, and it really resonates with me, and I'm sure with many of our viewers, to really love what you do, because then the work doesn't feel like work and you're actually contributing to positive change. So why don't you go in a little bit more about Markee Developments? I would argue it's one of the most innovative new development companies in the market today, and you have huge plans. So love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, one of the questions that we asked in creating Markee Developments, and my partner's name is Jason Marks, and he has a background in business, finance, and development. He's built $3.7 billion worth of housing in the city of Toronto over the past 5 years. So he's got some serious chops in this space. And one of the questions we asked was whether there's a way to take the best of what we know about city building, about construction, about financing, about design, about partnerships, and use that to kind of flip how we deliver housing that is affordable. And historically, affordable housing has sort of been the preview of not-for-profits and smaller organizations that get, donations to maybe build 10 units or 20 units. And we basically asked the question whether there was a model that we could create where we are delivering housing that is as of high a quality or higher, that meets the highest environmental sustainability objectives, and also delivers housing that is affordable and stays affordable in perpetuity. And the bulk of our model is geared towards middle income earners. So people earning between $50,000 and $110,000 a year in the city of Toronto are middle income earners. And right now, a middle income earner struggles to pay an average rent. And so what we basically asked this question and then started on the fantastic creative journey of figuring out how to create a company that can deliver on that model, and I'll get to the punchline and we can talk about all the stuff in between some more. But the punchline is we are going to, within a very short period of time, be one of the largest developers in the city of Toronto. And I love Habitat for Humanity. I've been a big supporter of Habitat for Humanity. I've been involved in builds, but just to give you a sense of scale, Habitat for Humanity has built something like, 250, 300 units over 20 years. We are going to build over 2,500 units in our first 5 years. We already have over 2,000 of those units in the development process, in the development pipeline. So our big thing that differentiates us, I would argue, focused on those middle income earners. And for me, it's about city building, right? If my kids can't afford to live in this city, we've screwed up. Like, we all can't become San Francisco. Like, we want to be cities where artists and creative types and young people say, I see a future for myself in this city. And right now we've been on a trajectory that is wiping that out. And that scares me because I love this city and I want this city to thrive, and it won't thrive if the people who make it interesting and who bring it energy, new immigrants, are saying, hold on, there's no future for me here. There's no place for me here. So that's kind of been the motivation and the driver from a city building perspective for me. But there's other things. We haven't built great affordable housing that is sustainable. We want our projects to also be best practices in sustainability, but we also want them to be best practices in design excellence. And I've had the great pleasure of touring projects through Western Europe that are affordable housing that I've looked at with my husband and said, man, I wish we could live here. So that's the goal. And that's why we've hired KPMB to be our architectural firm, an award-winning firm with phenomenal design chops, and a commitment to design excellence, and the planning partnership to be our architectural firm for our first project, which is Tyndale Green.
So tell us, and especially since you're in those early stages still, how you get things off the ground. What do you do? What is the strategy?
Well, many years ago, actually when I was in grad school, I created a not-for-profit organization. And some of you may be familiar with, so this was the very first thing I created before I even created Office for Urbanism or Dialogue. And in creating this not-for-profit, which was called All Aboard Youth Ventures, and some of you may be familiar with Eva's Phoenix, or which serves at-risk youth, or the Paint Box at Regent Park. These are actually legacy projects, in components of them, of what we did at All Aboard Youth Venture, which was essentially we created businesses that employed at-risk youth. That's what the mandate was. And we had a restaurant on Ronsonsville called River Restaurant that was there for 13 years. So I created the not-for-profit with my husband. And in creating that not-for-profit, I was in grad school, I was working part-time. I had read somewhere, I don't remember where, I had read somewhere that if you have a dream, do one thing every day to make the dream real. Do one thing. It could be a phone call, it could be an email, it could be research, but do one thing every day to make the dream real. And so I used that to get All Aboard Youth Ventures, which had a phenomenal run, served thousands and thousands of youth over a 13-year period. But we got that off the ground by following this one thing a day, because my husband was working elsewhere at the same time. We said, every day, let's do one thing to make All Aboard Youth Ventures real. And I've kind of taken that approach with every other thing I've ever built since, which is I say, okay, what's one thing that I can do today? And if you're passionate about what you're doing, that one thing is going to lead to 10 others. It creates spin-offs. So I've always, it's physics really. You just need to get the momentum going. You need to get something started. And once you get the energy going and something started, that one thing a day is how you can drive something to a phenomenal outcome. That's kind of my first big thing. The second is that it's really critical in starting anything. And I would say when we started Office for Urbanism, we were naive about this, but is really understanding what you do know, what you don't know, and who the people are whose advice you trust. Don't take the advice of people you don't trust or people you don't like. And I will tell you, when you're starting something, lots of people will give you their free advice, and most of it is worth nothing. So find the people you admire and take their advice. And I actually will say that's one of the things I've done phenomenally well throughout my career. And I've usually done it at the beginning of the new year. I basically identify 10 people who I think are doing something that I would like to do, and I figure out a way to meet and follow them. And ironically, over the past 20 years, many of those people have become some of my closest friends, because I've called them up and said, I've usually found some excuse to get to know them and to bring them into my circle. And they become your friend when there can be a mutual exchange, when there's something that you can offer them as well. But in some instances, some of these people have been along with, they've helped me through part of the journey. In other instances, there's been, a relationship has emerged as a result. But look out there and find the people who are doing something that, and for me, it's been looking well beyond my profession. There are business leaders that I've followed religiously. I've read everything that Jim Collins, whose kind of signature book is Good to Great. I've read everything he's ever written, and I follow him religiously. And I find that his values and ideas resonate with me when I put them into practice. So I would say, figure out what you do well, know what you don't do well, ask people, like, face the hard truths about yourself, about what you don't do well, and then get people into your orbit who can fill the gap. And if you can get those people into your orbit who can fill the gap, then as you're doing your one thing every day, you're learning, you're growing, you're learning, you're growing. And then the third thing that I'll say is that anyone who's an entrepreneur who has ever started anything in their lives will know that people succeed because they have failed so much and they haven't stopped. And I think that has been probably, the number of people who've said no to me, whether it's for capital or whether it's for land and starting at Markee or whatever it's been, far, far away the people who've said yes. But it's that tenacity of getting knocked down and going, I'm going to get back up, and getting knocked down and I'm going to get back up. And I have to say that being at City Hall for 5 years was a great training ground for that, because it's a rough and tumble place, and there's not a lot of visionary people at City Hall, quite frankly. So it takes a lot you really have to stick your elbows out. You really have to push really, really hard in order to get things done. And any entrepreneur who's been successful has figured out that secret thing of how and where to push in a way that's going to be successful. And it's different depending on the color of your skin, depending on your education, depending on whether you're a woman or a man. I can't push in the same way my male colleagues do, because I can tell you I don't get the same response. And I look at some of my male colleagues and the way they push, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. So you have to take, that's the world that we live in, being real about the political realities of the world we live in, but then figuring out how within those political realities to push is how you're going to get things done. And you have to have very, very thick skin.
Your answer was so perfect. I'm thinking of cropping this part of the video and recording it, I don't know what, every morning. Thank you for that really inspiring answer. I really appreciate it. You mentioned that within the next 2 years, Markee Developments will be the largest housing provider in the country. What is the strategy? How do you plan? And I'm also asking this on, behind the scenes. How do you plan this strategy for the next 2 years, like the technical aspects of it?
Well, I wouldn't say we will be, we could be. I think it's a little bit of a longer horizon that we will be one of the largest, but we will get very, very close. And the way is by having absolute clarity when you set out in whatever you're creating or doing, what differentiates you, and then being very careful not to go down the rabbit holes, because there's many, many rabbit holes. You know, for example, when we launched Markee, people started calling us with land. And lots of people have called us with land. And it's very easy to take what's right in front of us, even though it might not fit with the bigger strategy, because it's actually, you know, some of these sites, they don't meet all of our criteria, but they're right there, right? Like, you know, that tenacity and lots of people saying no. And so we've just been very ambitious in sticking to being somewhat aggressive in trying to get the bigger sites that we believe can deliver on the bigger vision. We don't want to just build a building or build buildings. We want to be a part of city building and placemaking and environmental sustainability, as well as, and we see affordability as a critical component to delivering on all of those things. So staying kind of like laser focused on what, and I'll be honest, we have been distracted at times. We had, you know, we've had moments where we've gone, whoa, we're getting distracted here, we're losing our way. Sticking to the course is really critical to not going down a rabbit hole and potentially undermining your own vision and what you're seeking to achieve. That being said, what's so hard about, I think, being entrepreneurial is that on the flip side of that, you have to know when to adapt. You have to know when something isn't working, and you also have to know when to say, I think we need to adjust our strategy here. And you have to really have a lot of clarity around what is an opportunity and what isn't. Because sometimes something might not be an opportunity on the face of it, but when you do a little deeper, dig a little deeper, you start to see how it emerges as an opportunity. Those things are in tension, right? Staying focused, but also being adaptable. They're in constant tension. And you have to know, have to know when to hold your ground and when to flex. And it's tricky. And that's why having, you know, people around you that are really strong and that share the vision is really critical. And also knowing when to go to some of those, you know, that brain trust that you've created of people who are already doing things that you aspire to do. Knowing when to lean on that brain trust to help you with those tough decisions is absolutely critical to manage that tension.
Wondering if we can take it back for a moment to a particular experience that it was a significant challenge or obstacle in your life or career that really helped shape you and your perspective into who you are today.
Oh, there's so many. There's so many obstacles. Oh, there's so many. You know, the most recent one, which is really important for me, is when I ran for office, when I ran for mayor of the city of Toronto, which really shaped me because I was so far out of my comfort zone. And when you move really far out of your comfort zone, the bounds of what your comfort zone is expands. So I'm much more comfortable doing certain things that I wasn't comfortable doing. And my tolerance for risk has completely shifted as a result of running for mayor. Because that was by far the riskiest thing that I've done in my career so far. And it could have gone wrong in so many ways. And in the big scheme of things, you know, someone said to me, a political pundit who has actually worked for many political leaders over many years after the campaign, probably about 6 months after the campaign, said to me, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like the whole world has expanded. Like the world has expanded for me in a really, really profound way. And he said, well, when people lose, one of two things happens. Either it destroys them or it empowers them. And I think for me, it empowered me because one of the most things I'm most grateful for about our campaign, which was thrown together on the fly. And in the big scheme of things, I got a tremendous number of votes. I just have to say that. More votes than any other elected municipal official in Canada, other than my competitor in Val But any other mayor in Canada Canada, I have significantly more votes behind my name. You have to say these positive things to yourself when you lose, right? You've got to figure out a way to get yourself into a positive headspace, which you really need to be an entrepreneur. But one of the very big things that came out of that for me was a recognition that I could do things that were incredibly scary and difficult and not lose my core, not lose who I am. I'm phenomenally proud of all of the policies we put forward, and amazingly, someone who worked on my campaign team has made a little graph, and like 90% of them are being implemented right now, including now even Transform Young, which was something that I initiated as chief planner. So, over time, all of those things are kind of coming to fruition. So this question of whether you get through a very trying experience and difficult experience and you get to the other side of it stronger or weaker, I believe, comes from whether or not you held on to your core values, even when the stakes were down and something was phenomenally difficult. And I'm really proud of my team that was around me and the policies that we put forward. And there were some cheap political things we could have done, but we didn't. We never did. We ran a clean campaign. And I can say that we were not competing in a clean environment. There were lots of things that happened that, you'll probably never hear about, and you probably don't ever want to hear about. And there are probably reasons why it's difficult for me to comprehend running again. But we didn't do that. We held on to our core. And as a result, I was like, wow, the chips can be down. And I know I will not lose my center. I will not compromise my values. I know that now. I've been through that refiner's fire. And so I will just say that when you confront those moments in your life, even if you might not win and you might get knocked down flat on your ass, if you can hold on to who you are and your values, it's almost like it builds your own trust in yourself to take on the next challenge, that you know that you are going to do the right thing when the chips are down. And I can tell you, there's lots of people who we've seen this all around us who don't do this, right? And they're unfortunately not very good political leaders. But I think that's probably, I've never really talked about this before or publicly, so that's why it's not coming out very smoothly. But that was the experience that I think really changed me. And there's many more before that. It's been a continual building, and I'm sure it will continue to build, but that was a big one.
That's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it certainly built you up into the person that you are today. So it's amazing. Important to push your comfort zones. So we're approaching 11:30. So I want to ask you our last question. What's a book that's really had a profound impact on your life? It could be business, it could be personal development, one that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I've already mentioned, like from the perspective of being an entrepreneur, I've already mentioned Good to Great by Jim Collins, which may seem a little bit dated, but the time it came out and the time I was building my businesses, it was the most impactful book. And I still think everything I learned through it holds true and I bring into my work today. As an urbanist and an urban planner, it may be trite to say The Life and Death of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, but it was the book that I read that made me go, oh, this is where I belong. This is the world I'm excited and passionate about. But there's two others that I'd like to just add. One is when Jane Jacobs wrote Dark Age Ahead, I actually didn't read it. It was like, oh, what a terribly depressing title. There's no way I'm reading that book. But then when Trump got elected, I did read Dark Age Ahead. And I was shocked at how prophetic that book is. And I think it hasn't shaped me as an entrepreneur or as a planner, but I think it has some insights about the time we're in right now. And so that's a book that I would highly recommend. It's a very quick, very easy read, and it's a good one to read because we can't isolate our discipline or our industry from this greater moment in history that we're a part of. And if we do, I would argue, we're a part of the problem. So if we're going to upend the greatest challenges of our time, including the threat to democracy that we see, I saw something written the other day about how most failed coups are followed within 5 years by successful ones. We ought to be, we don't have the luxury right now of turning it off and being disinterested in what's happening in the States, and we are not insulated in any way from this in Canada. The racial injustices that have been exposed through COVID, the political challenges that we face, they're not separate from our industry. So I would say that, you know, Jane Jacobs' book is a quick, easy way into that question, although there's many, many others that I would highly recommend.
I know Lirad promised that would be the last question, but I do want to squeeze in one. You know, I don't have that opportunity too often, unfortunately, Jennifer. What advice would you give your younger self looking back?
Well, I think the biggest advice would be, I've spent many years, I think that this will sound strange, but I think the advice I would give is it's going to be okay. Because I brought into my work a tremendous amount, I think, of anxiety about trying to prove myself and trying to do something meaningful. And I think the advice would be, it's going to be okay. It's going to come in time. Because there are definitely moments in my career to date where I've been much too hard on myself, and I've had a lot of anxiety. I worry about doing things well. I worry about the people around me. I worried every day about my team and the kind of things they had to deal with when I was chief planner. I was stressed and anxious about that. And this is in some ways a big counter to my earlier message about us engaging in the bigger world around us, but on a personal level, and this is a very personal thing, you know, just not being anxious about, you know, if you're doing work that you believe in and you're being honest and you're committed to the greater good, do that work, but don't do it with anxiety, because the anxiety doesn't really help anyone. The anxiousness doesn't really help anyone. And I think I've been very hard on myself, and I sort of regret that. I just turned 50 this year, and I'm kind of going, you know what, like, it's all going to be okay. Do what you need to do to sleep well at night. You know, find the moral high ground and do what you believe will actually make the world a better place. But don't take on the weight of the world, because you can't.
Jennifer, I am so happy you said yes when I reached out and invited you to be on our webinar series. That was by far one of the most inspirational conversations I've ever had. Thank you very, very much. And guys, thank you so much for listening. I saw the numbers also here on the YouTube, and I think it speaks to itself. So thank you for being with us. In 2 weeks, we are having Sasha Choo-Choos from Greybrook Capital for another different aspect of the industry and the business, but it's going to be a very good one. If you know Sasha, you know that he is a very good speaker. Jennifer, thank you again. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for joining. See you next time.
Thank you very much.